Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. On today's episode, we jump ahead to the Galactic Alliance era, as the galaxy heals itself from the civil war started by Darth Caedus. Jedi Knight Jaden Korr has a vision of someone in trouble on a frozen world. As Jaden searches for the planet in the unknown regions, a surprise from the ancient past arrives with cargo that could make Dark Force users unstoppable. It's Crosscurrent by Paul S. Kemp. But before we get to the story, let me take some listener questions. Today's first email comes from Jeremiah, who says, I love the podcast. As of today, I have listened to all the episodes. I thoroughly enjoy each one. Rogue One was my introduction to Star Wars, and it remains my favorite movie. I hadn't dived into the Legends universe until last year at the recommendation of a friend. One question I have for you, who do you think is the most overrated character in Star Wars? For me, it's Yoda. I like him, but how can you live 900 years and miss what Palpatine was doing? Well, thank you very much for the email, Jeremiah, and welcome to the wild, wonderful, and weird world of Star Wars Legends. I hope you enjoy the journey. I don't know how you define overrated, but there are characters I don't find as interesting as other people do, like Han Solo, Kylo Ren, or Emperor Palpatine. That doesn't mean I don't love those characters. I just don't think their story arcs are as interesting as many other fans do, and that's fine. But if I had to pick just one character, it would be Anakin Skywalker. Don't get me wrong, I really like Anakin, but I think he's much more interesting as Darth Vader than before he turns to the dark side of the Force. In my opinion, Anakin is someone who feels entitled, who knows he's gifted, feels held back by the structure of the Jedi Order, and is unable to deal with his emotions. That's why I don't think he's that interesting. I think he is much more compelling in the original trilogy as Darth Vader, where he feels trapped. He's achieved some of what he wanted. He's got power. The galaxy, for the most part, is at peace. But it's almost like the dog who caught the car. He's now having to deal with the results of his actions. And that is far more interesting to me. Today's second email comes from Shaughnessy, who says, I've been a fan of your show for some time now and can say you have personally influenced me to start reading the Legends books. I now have almost all of them. You and your group of friends help me through long days. I find myself repeating a lot of your episodes to make sure I caught everything. My question, is there someone in Legends or canon that is stronger with the Force and more powerful with their lightsaber combat than Darth Vader? Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Shaughnessy, and like the previous emailer, Jeremiah, I hope you're enjoying your journey through the Legends stories. I have a question for you pertaining to your question. What does more powerful mean? We know Luke and Obi-Wan can beat Vader in lightsaber combat, because we've seen them do it on the screen. And I think there are plenty of others who could defeat Vader. I think Dooku could. Yoda, Palpatine, Bane, Revan, Mace Windu. There's probably dozens of others. That doesn't mean that I think any of them are better at lightsaber combat than Vader is. But to me, this question has sort of a sporting aspect. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Wayne Gretzky, Tom Brady, these are some of the athletes that many people say are the greatest of all time. But sometimes they lose. I'm old enough to remember when Mike Tyson was the most feared man on the planet, and then he got knocked out in Tokyo by Buster Douglas. So I think Vader could be considered the best lightsaber duelist, although I think that is debatable. But even as powerful as Vader was, I think there are many powerful Force users who could defeat him in combat. Thanks again for the email, Shaughnessy. Now, listener, if you have a question for the show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. And coming up at the end of the show, we'll hear more from Jeremiah as he emailed a few Star Wars character groupings. You'll want to stay tuned for that. But now it's time for today's book, Crosscurrent by Paul S. Kemp. Grab yourself a drink and let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story takes place in two eras. It begins 5,000 years ago at the start of the Great Hyperspace War. Jedi Master Relin Drur and his Padawan, Drev Hassan, search for Relin's former Padawan, Sace Rogan. Sace left the Order shortly after being elevated to Jedi Knight and joined Naga Sato and the Sith Army. Sace commands two Sith capital ships that he takes to a moon in the Phagan system to mine lignin crystals. Lignins enhance the ability of Force users to connect to the dark side. The two Jedi sneak up on the Sith cruisers, allowing Relin to board Sace's ship, Harbinger. Immediately, Relin feels the influence of the lignin crystals, using his anger to fight his way to the cruiser's hyperdrive engine. Relin damages the engine, but Sace arrives and stops Relin from completely destroying it. The former master and apprentice duel, with Relin fighting off Sace, but not before Sace slices his former master's arm off at the elbow. As Sace flees from the engine room, he orders Harbinger and its sister ship Omen to jump to lightspeed to deliver the lignin crystals to Naga Sato. The damaged hyperdrive core starts to spool up, blasting Relin with dangerous levels of radiation. The Jedi escapes the engine room and heads for Harbinger's escape pods. He calls Drev and orders his Padawan to escape, but Drev refuses, telling his master their mission is to stop Naga Sato from getting the lignin crystals. Drev flies his shuttle into Harbinger's bridge, sacrificing himself to stop the Sith cruiser. Relin launches his escape pod just as Harbinger jumps to lightspeed. But the damage to the hyperdrive core causes Harbinger to misjump. It sideswipes Omen, forcing its sister ship down onto a mysterious nearby planet. Then, a hole opens in hyperspace, pulling Harbinger and Relin's escape pod inside. We jump ahead to present day. The Galactic Alliance starts to heal in the wake of the civil war waged against Darth Caedus. Jedi Knight Jaden Kor has a Force vision, warning him of someone in trouble in the unknown regions. Jaden also sees the faces of Jedi Masters Cam Solusar and Mara Jade Skywalker, as well as the Sith Lady Lumaya in his vision. Jaden heads to the planet Faust at the border of known space. There, he finds a pair of salvage jockeys, Kedron Fall and Mar Edie Shale, who recorded a strange comm signal on their last trip into the unknown regions. Jaden uses the Force to help Kedron beat a local mob boss in a corrupt sabacc game, but of course, the game ends in a blaster shootout, with Jaden, Kedron, and Mar running out of the cantina for Keaton's ship, the Junker. Unknown to our heroes, there's another person watching the shootout at the cantina, Kel Doro, an Anzot hired to follow Jaden Kor. Kel was hired by Darth Weirlock and the One Sith to keep the origin of the mysterious comm signal a secret. Darth Weirlock promises Kel that after he makes sure nobody can find the source of the signal, the assassin can eliminate Jaden Kor and feed on the Jedi's soup, in hopes to achieve clarity and salvation. Jaden convinces Kedron to take him to where Junker picked up the mysterious comm signal. They travel to an uncharted gas giant and pick up the signal from one of its moons. But that's not all that's in the system. They also find a capital ship floating just outside the system's asteroid belt. Intrigued, they approach the ship, It's huge, and it looks ancient. As they fly past the cruiser, they pick up a signal. It's coming from an escape pod they find floating nearby. They pick up the pod and discover an injured one-armed man inside. The man seems confused. He demands to know where he is and which side of the war Jaden, Kedron, and Mar are on, the Republic or the Sith Empire. The questions confuse Jaden. He uses the Force to try to calm the man, who immediately recognizes Jaden as a Force user. Eventually, the man calms down and tells the group his name is Jedi Master Relin Drur, and he's fighting Nagasato and the Sith Empire. Nagasato? The name stuns Jaden. Nagasato was defeated nearly 5,000 years ago. The news rocks Relin, who tells the group about Sace, the lignin crystals, and what happened when Harbinger jumped to hyperspace. You must have ripped a hole in space-time, Kedron says. The group continues to talk to Relin when suddenly Harbinger launches a squadron of Blade fighters. The Blades chase Junker into the asteroid field, where Jaden convinces Kedron to allow him to fly the ship. Calling on the Force, Jaden accelerates through the asteroids, jinking and dodging left and right. 3 of the Blades are destroyed in their wake, allowing Jaden the time to land Junker on one of the bigger rocks and hide. On Harbinger, Sace figures out what has happened, that he and the ship have traveled forward in time. Sace doesn't know what happened to the Sith Empire, but he figures that if the Sith are still a galactic power, he can offer the Sith his cachet of lignin crystals. But if the Sith Empire isn't in control, Sace decides to use the lignins himself to take control. In the asteroid field, our heroes decide to split up. Relin wants to finish his mission, to destroy the lignins and defeat his former apprentice. Mar volunteers to fly Relin to Harbinger and help the Jedi Master infiltrate the cruiser. Meanwhile, Jaden and Kedron will head down to the frozen moon to investigate the comm signal. Watching everything from the outskirts of the asteroid belt in a cloaked ship, Kel Doro sees Junker and its shuttle go their separate ways. The assassin works out that Jaden Core is on the shuttle, and he follows it down to the moon. Jaden and Kedron dive through the moon's atmosphere and soon discover the source of the comm signal, an old Thrawn-era cloning facility. The lab is a horror scene. Dead, dismembered bodies litter the floor. Computer terminals are destroyed. And on a wall, written in blood, is the message, "Mother is hungry." Jaden and Kedron find one working computer terminal in the lab's control room containing recordings of something called the Jedi-Sith Cloning Project. Imperial scientists trying to combine Jedi and Sith DNA to create powerful Force users. Some of the recordings are damaged, but there's enough for Jaden and Kedron to watch as one scientist documents how the experiment is slowly failing. The clones went mad and became dangerous. Eventually, they escaped their cells and started hunting the scientists and the stormtroopers at the facility. After they finish watching the recording, Jaden orders Kedron to head back to the shuttle and keep it warmed up in case they have to leave quickly. As Kedron leaves, Jaden draws his lightsaber and starts down to the lower levels of the facility. Junker emerges from the asteroid field, and Mar maneuvers the ship into one of Harbinger's docking bays. Relin and Mar start toward the cargo hold when they're confronted by Sace and a squad of Massassi warriors. Relin draws his lightsaber and starts slicing through the Massassi, while Mar lays down suppression fire from behind the Jedi Master. As Relin draws on the Force, the influence of the lignin crystals causes his anger to rise. When Relin kills the last Massassi, he orders Mar to leave. He must face his former apprentice alone. In the lower levels of the cloning lab, Jaden finds a dozen cells beneath a glass floor. The cells are in disarray, and there's another message painted in blood. "Quit watching us." Jaden descends into the cells. The stench of decomposing bodies is nearly overwhelming. As the Jedi passes the cells, he finds a Spartai cloning cylinder filled with the dead remains of the lab personnel. Jaden is startled by a noise from behind him. Slowly, one of the mad clones emerges from the darkness. It's one of the faces from Jaden's Force vision, Master Cam Solusar. The clone tells Jaden the Spartai cylinder is Mother. She birthed the clone and his siblings. Mother is hungry and needs to be fed. The clone ignites a lightsaber and attacks Jaden. He cuts Jaden's hand, slicing off 3 fingers. But suddenly, Jaden blasts out with Force lightning. It shocks the clone, and Jaden drives his lightsaber through the clone's chest, killing him. On Harbinger, Relin confronts his former apprentice. Sace mocks Relin, taunting him with Drev's death. Realizing he has fallen to the dark side, Relin drops his lightsaber and blasts Sace with the Force. Sace fights back, and the two batter each other through the Force, throwing each other against the walls and ceiling. Finally, Sace grabs Relin in a Force choke. Just before he loses consciousness, Relin digs deep into the dark side and grabs Sace by the throat. He calls his lightsaber to his hand and slashes his former apprentice, killing him. Exhausted from fighting and dying from radiation poisoning, Relin slowly staggers toward the cargo hold. Jaden climbs out of the Spartai cylinder when suddenly he's lifted off his feet. The assassin Kel Doro stands in front of him. Jaden struggles but can't break free. He looks on in terror as the Anzat's proboscises emerge from the sides of his face and snake up through Jaden's nostrils. Just before the feeding tubes reach into Jaden's brain, Kedron appears beside Kel Doro. He places the muzzle of his blaster against the Anzat's temple. Kedron fires, saving Jaden. The two head back up to the surface. When they reach the shuttle, Kedron notices there are tracks where the assassin ship had landed. It's empty now, and Jaden instantly realizes what has happened. The other clones have escaped. Relin makes it to Harbinger's cargo hold. The power of the dark side emanating from the lignin crystals is almost overwhelming. Knowing he only has a few moments left to live, Relin opens himself fully to the Force. Using the lignins to amplify the dark side, Relin sends out an immense shockwave of Force energy. Harbinger's engines explode, and the cruiser falls toward the gas giant. The story ends when Jaden and Kedron arrive back on Junker. They and Mar watch in silence as Harbinger plunges into the planet's atmosphere, exploding in the clouds. Jaden says he needs to find the clones that escaped the lab. The three head back to Faust to make their plans. The hunt for the Force-sensitive clones is about to begin. Time to take a break. When we return, I'll talk more about Crosscurrent. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But allow me to recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, is the story of Galen Erso, Orson Krennic, and the construction of the first Death Star. It's a story of intrigue, betrayal, and how a friendship can be destroyed. An essential story leading up to Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Check out Catalyst, a Rogue One novel by James Luceno. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today I'm talking about Crosscurrent by Paul S. Kemp. I think as far as fairly quick, small story adventures goes, this book is fine. I've never been a fan of time travel in stories, the one exception being Back to the Future. That's a comedy. There's really no stakes in the movie. But other books, television shows, movies that involve time travel, logically, I don't wrap my head around it very well. It always seems to create just as many problems as it fixes. I will give Paul S. Kemp credit. In this story, I like the fact that the time travel is only forward, and the people that make the time jump, the Jedi Master Rellin and the Sith Lord Sace, do not survive. They don't jump back to 5,000 years ago, to the beginning of the Great Hyperspace War. I think that loop would have caused issues, logic issues, in the storytelling. But for them to simply jump forward in time to an isolated place in the unknown regions of the galaxy, there is a very short adventure that ends in mutual destruction of both Rellin and Sace and the lignin crystals. I think that's fine. I don't think there are any logical issues, in my opinion, in this story. And again, while I say it's fine, I think I may have been more invested in the tale if I had any experience with the Jedi Academy video games that Jaden Core came from. I could figure out, just from the reading, that Jaden has touched the dark side of the Force in the past, that he is embarrassed about it, that he is ashamed about it, that he is reluctant to open himself to the Force outside of just at surface level, like when he's influencing the Sabacc game at the beginning of the story. Is this an essential book to read for the Legends timeline, for Legends continuity? No. If you're a completionist, if you really like the character of Jaden Core and you enjoy the Jedi Academy video games, then this is a fine story. For me, the parts of this book that gave me the most enjoyment were the tie-ins with other Legends stories. Some of the references to the recent galactic war, some of the references to Darth Caedus, obviously allusions to the Great Hyperspace War 5,000 years ago in the old Tales of the Jedi comic series. Omen, and how Omen gets sideswiped by Harbinger and crashes onto a mysterious planet. It's the beginning of John Jackson Miller's Lost Tribe of the Sith. I really enjoy that story. And of course, between the beginning of this story and the references to Omen and the Lost Tribe of the Sith, Harbinger being the name of Sace's cruiser is a pretty cool entry point into the next series in Legends, The Fate of the Jedi. We will get there in the future. Those of you who have already read the series understand what I'm talking about. But the Lost Tribe of the Sith play a big role in that series. I had more issues with the Jedi Sith cloning experiment. Not that the experiment existed, although I find some of the storytelling about cloning, specifically about cloning Force users, to get repetitive in both Legends and now in canon. But the issue I had with this one specifically is Jaden says that it's an old Thrawn era cloning facility. From the Heir of the Empire trilogy, we know that Thrawn found the Emperor's storehouse at Mount Tantus with all the Spartai cylinders, and he started growing a clone army to man the Katana fleet. We know that. But what was one of Thrawn's very few blind spots? The Force. It doesn't quite work for me that Thrawn would be interested in trying to clone Force users, that Thrawn would be trying to use both Jedi and Sith organic materials to grow Force users that, I don't know, used both the light and the dark side of the Force. Maybe that does work for some people. For me, I just find it strange that Thrawn would be interested in that, considering one of his very few blind spots are Force users, at least in Legends. Some of the Thrawn books in canon, he seems to deal with Force users a little better. Now, the ending of this book sets up the next book. This is kind of a duology, Crosscurrent, and in the next book, Riptide, also by Paul S. Kemp, and that will be the story of Jaden chasing the clones that have escaped this unnamed frozen moon and the cloning facility there. We'll have to see where the author takes the story. We'll have to see. Maybe I will enjoy Riptide just a little more than I did Crosscurrent. One other part of the book that I really did enjoy, like I liked a lot, was when Jaden and Master Relin can sense that Mar has some Force abilities. I like the fact that the first time they sense it is when Mar is doing very complex mathematical computations, that through doing these equations, Mar's mental abilities shine through, that he's able to touch the Force by exercising his brain. It's an example of how anyone can touch the Force. Now, it does seem that Mar has a little more talent than most people, and at the end of the book, Jaden agrees to start training Mar to use his Force abilities. That's something that I've always found really cool, when a character's ability to touch the Force manifests itself in a different way, or that they see the Force in a different way. Mar sees it as a complex mathematical equation. I think that's cool. We don't really see much of that in Legends. We see a little bit more of that in canon. In the new High Republic series, there are Jedi that experience the Force as music, or as being submerged in the ocean, or as a wind blowing through the trees of a forest. I think that's cool. I would love to know how Luke Skywalker experiences the Force. I would love to know what Obi-Wan Kenobi sees when he's touching the Force, or Yoda, or Anakin, or even some of the dark side users. I'd love to see what Palpatine or Dooku or Bane see when they're touching the Force. How their minds and how their emotions experience it. if everyone has the ability on some level to touch the Force, I think that means that everyone experiences it in their own way. And I like that the author, Paul S. Kemp, allows us to experience that with Mar. I really do. I would love to see more of these examples in storytelling going forward. And it's almost time to go, but first, I have some Star Wars character groupings to share. Jeremiah sent in 3 different groups. First up, Jeremiah's Mount Rushmore of favorite Star Wars characters. They are Ahsoka Tano, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Din Djarin, and Jyn Erso, with honorable mentions to Bail Organa and Padme Amidala. Jeremiah's second group is a fighter squadron that he's named Scarif Squadron. One flight, General Ahsoka Tano with Huyang, Jaina Solo, Hera Syndulla, and Rey in honor of Jeremiah's daughter. Well, that's very sweet, Jeremiah. I love that your daughter loves Rey. 2 flight, Jedi Master Plo Koon, Din Djarin, Asajj Ventress, and Lando Calrissian. And 3 flight, Luke Skywalker, Biggs Darklighter, Han Solo and Chewie, and Wedge Antilles. And finally, Jeremiah has a ground invasion team, with General Obi-Wan Kenobi leading the Bad Batch and Qui-Gon Jinn leading the Rogue One Scarif invasion team. Those are great lists, Jeremiah. Thank you for sharing them with me. Listener, if you have a favorite Star Wars fighter squadron, road trip crew, Mount Rushmore, or if you disagree with something I've said on the podcast and you'd like to offer a different opinion, send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram, also at swlegendslounge. Now, coming up on the next episode, we'll conclude this story with Riptide by Paul S. Kemp. Jaden Korr searches for the rogue clones before they can wreak havoc throughout the unknown regions. You can look forward to that episode coming out September 20th. Once again, thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.